New gun legislation tabled by the federal government has been getting both criticism and praise. Bill C-21 introduces a buyback program for barred firearms, allows municipalities to ban handguns, and increases criminal penalties for gun smuggling and trafficking. I spoke with a trauma surgeon and a gun control advocate who says a majority of Canadians want stronger gun laws.
The majority of Canadians want stronger gun legislation that will make our homes and communities safer, that will remove the semi-automatic rifles that were prohibited in the Orders of Council of May 2020. That is our desire and wish as well. And a national strategy rather than a patchwork would be more desirable from the perspective of many Canadians.
There's lots of different perspectives out there, and we wanted to get one more on this issue. Rod Giltaca is the CEO and Executive Director of Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. We've reached him tonight in Vancouver. Rod, thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thanks for having me.
So, sir, I imagine you were able to hear our clip from yesterday's interview with Dr. Ahmed. What do you have to say to that?
Well, I guess to speak specifically to the point that Canadians overwhelmingly want licensed gun owners to have their guns taken away from them, I would disagree. In fact, if I were to throw a single point out, I'd say look at the most signed e-petition, Canadian government e-petition in Canadian history. It's a petition against this OIC that banned all these guns. In fact, the government's own numbers represent that Canadians don't want a so-called assault-style rifle ban nor a handgun ban. So she's getting her information from different sources, I guess, than I am.
I don't want to certainly speak for the guest yesterday, but I think what she was saying was that what most Canadians want is a greater sense of safety. And so I imagine you wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. So here's the point. What if the government's plan is to try and make the public more safe by eliminating the misuse of handguns? What's your concern with the bill as it's proposed right now?
Okay, well, there's a lot there, so I'll try to make it as brief as possible. So the government puts a lot of effort into trying to link licensed gun owners and criminal use of firearms. And this is what they do the majority of the time. And this bill is a reflection of that. So is Bill C-71. So is the assault-style rifle ban of May 1st of last year. When it comes to that link, basically the government relies on the idea of stolen guns. Well, even though the overwhelming majority of guns that are used in criminal activity in Canada come from across the border, and that's a fact, and we know it's well established now, there's still, let's say, 30% of guns are sourced domestically. And when it comes to stolen guns, it's interesting. It seems like such a difficult issue for them to solve. But I think most people that live in, let's say, difficult areas in Canada know that property crime is out of control in some areas of Canada. So if they dealt with their property crime issue, there is no break-ins to steal guns. Therefore, you'll see a decline in the number of stolen guns on the street. So it's again, I guess, by extension, it's the failure of the government, both municipal and federal, to deal with crime and criminal issues. And of course, they create bills like this to foist that responsibility, that accountability on licensed gun owners. And that's the problem.
Something that often comes up, sir, in this conversation is mass shootings and the incredible amount of violence, damage, death, and destruction that comes from that. You know, people often reference École Polytechnique in 1989. They reference the Quebec mosque shooting that happened a few years ago, the shooting on the Danforth. And the argument for many people is that anything could be used as a weapon, but even if you had a knife or a baseball bat, you can't achieve the same sort of destruction that you can with a gun with that level of speed and accuracy. There is a sense amongst a huge portion of the Canadian population that guns are being misused. So how do we resolve this issue when nobody wants more gun violence? No one wants guns to be used illegally. So what is the solution?
Well, when it comes to multiple victim public shootings, they don't happen very often in Canada. And if they happen once, it's a horrible thing. No one wants that to happen. But there's a trade-off between, do we take guns away from 2.2 million Canadians who haven't done a thing to deserve it, or do we deal with the societal issues of radicalization, of division, of people feeling isolated in society. You know, it's interesting because you had the government of Canada, if you remember, that wanted to repatriate actual ISIS terrorists. And then at the same time, you know, and they'll tolerate that risk. And then at the same time, they're saying people like me that have a firearms license get a criminal record check every day. I'm too much. It's just a bridge too far. It's too much of a risk. Now, when it comes to multiple victim public shootings, they're very difficult to stop. They can happen with, if you look in the case of the Nova Scotia shooter, virtually all of his guns were smuggled over from the United States when we actually had police services knowing about this guy for a decade or so. So it's very difficult. And even if you use the situation of the van attack in Toronto, where 10 people were killed, and I think somewhere around another 16 injured. These things happen, and they happen because of violence, not specifically because of gun violence.
For a lot of folks who are on the other side of the argument than you, they don't understand what is this commitment to guns? What is it? What seems to be a commitment to an object? And for the purposes of trying to open up a conversation, can you help people understand what is it? What makes people feel so passionately, they're coming for our guns and we got to save the guns? Because what is this divide? Why do the people who want to continue to hold on to their guns and weaponry, why do they feel so strongly about it? What exactly does this represent?
Well, that's a great question, and it's a conversation that mainstream Canada has to have, especially, of course, people that don't understand why people would own a gun. So when it comes to guns, guns have been in Canada, including AR-15s. AR-15s have been in Canada since the 60s. Guns have been in Canada since before Confederation. And people that own firearms can never picture themselves without firearms. And the reason for that is some people hunt, some people target shoot, and I'm going to use sport shooters as a great example. So hunting, I think most people understand that quite well. But when it comes to sport shooting, the people that are involved in sport shooting, all of their personal relationships are with other gun people. They volunteer their time at ranges. They do fundraisers at their ranges. They engage in all these sports. They spend tens of thousands of dollars. They spend every weekend with their community. And there is truly a gun culture in Canada. And what people don't understand is, from my perspective, somebody like me, I'm looking at the government, I'm saying, come up with a real case, like a real tangible reason why it's too dangerous for me to own a gun, where you've fulfilled all of your responsibilities and we just can't seem to solve that problem. The problem is that the government has fulfilled none of their responsibilities and they're looking for a scapegoat, and they always have used gun control to change the channel. So guns mean a whole lot more than I think to gun owners than I think non-gun owning Canadians understand. And that's why it's you know, we need a real justification to take our guns away. And that hasn't been shown.
Is there any room, before I let you go, is there any room for negotiation on this if people on the opposite side felt, okay, maybe this is a culture we don't understand and we need to get a bit closer? Is there room on your side of the argument to come a little bit into the middle and say, okay, maybe we can loosen up a bit for the purposes of making sure there isn't a next Nova Scotia mass shooting or a mosque shooting or any kind of mass shooting situation? Well,
there's a couple of things there. When it comes to gun control activists, let's say like Dr. Ahmed from yesterday, they say all kinds of things to lead Canadians to believe that there is no gun control in Canada. Canada has some of the strictest gun control on the planet right now, in pre-Bill C-21, you know, in 2019. And so I think it's really important that Canadians get educated on what gun control measures there are now, because guns are very strictly controlled. And as far as coming together and having a conversation about it, we are always open to a conversation. I've reached out to the Doctors for Protection from Guns and got no response at all. In fact, our group offered $15,000 to an inner city youth charity in Toronto for them to sit down with us on camera and just talk about this like mature adults. And there was no response there. So the gun people, the firearms community, we are absolutely ready to sit down and have that conversation.
Okay. Well, thank you for having a conversation with us, and let's hope we can keep the dialogue going, sir. Thanks so much. Rod Giltaca is the CEO and Executive Director of Canadian Coalitions for Firearm Rights. We reached him in Vancouver. Coming up, we're going to speak with Nico Yema. He's just been named the Parasport Junior Athlete of the Year. Nico and his